Welcome to the Self-Publishing School podcast. This is the podcast to listen to if you're an aspiring writer or an author who wants to be more successful. On this show, you'll learn how to write and launch a book successfully, all from the top authors and people just like you who are doing it at the highest level. I'm your host, Chandler Bolt, the founder of Self-Publishing School, the author of the book called Published, and the CEO of selfpublishing.com. For free training on how to publish a book that sells 10,000 copies, go to selfpublishing.com/free training.
My concepts, kind of my principles were forming who I was and who I wanted to be. And I thought about it like, how did I have success in hockey? And it was all the same things that you need to have success in life. So for me, it was like the book, again, was the entry point to deliver what was up here and the experiences that I lived back there. And I think that's what kind of drove me is to be an authority figure. Honestly, for people to take you seriously. I think in anything, if you want to grow your brand and spread your message and impact and inspire other people, that's the easiest way. It's the most cost-effective way to spread that message.
Hey, Chandler Bolt here, and joining me today is Erik Westrum. Erik is a former professional hockey player turned author, motivational speaker, and coach. He spent about a decade in the NHL. If you're watching this on the YouTube channel, you can see that hardware in the background. You can see the picture from his playing days. But he's the author of a book called Becoming Elite. So it's kind of a fun story, which I'm sure we'll get into. But Erik worked with us on his book, just did really well with it. And then he decided to join the team. He's one of our author strategists at selfpublishing.com. He's completed over 200 one-on-one calls with aspiring authors, and he's also speaking at Author Advantage Live this year. So there's a lot of different things that we're going to unpack. We'll talk about his journey as a pro athlete, turned author, what did he learn from that? We'll also talk about, and I think this will be very poignant for people watching or listening, is, he's spoken with over 200 people like you who are thinking about taking that next step with their book. And so there's a lot of lessons learned there. At some point, we'll also share, you'll have an opportunity to book a call directly with Erik to talk about your book. So there's a lot to cover, a lot to unpack. Erik, what's happening? Good to have you here.
Hey man, I'm excited. It's funny when you were talking just now, gets me thinking about like my wife, how she always says I got so much going on. I think you kind of just solidified that in my journey from playing hockey to owning businesses, right? To, writing my book to working with you now. So yeah, I've been blessed with the journey. And I'm excited to continue for sure.
Well, we're blessed to have you on the team, man. It's we talked about this, raising the bar, and you've already raised the bar and are helping change the lives of a ton of authors through the work that you're doing. So I guess before we get into kind of your journey as a pro athlete in the book, I want to just do a quick plug for Author Advantage Live. For those who don't know, Author Advantage Live, this is our yearly virtual event. We've got an incredible lineup this year. We got Gary Vaynerchuk, we got John Gordon, Dan Martell, Jess Ekstrom, and Erik. So Erik's going to be speaking there as well. So Erik, can you just touch on kind of maybe a overview of what are some of the things you're maybe going to share at the event? And more importantly, who should come and why should they get a ticket to come to Author Advantage Live?
Yeah, I think for me, it goes back to years ago, even when I was invited to that as, a person on the peripheral watching virtually, and just the resources you gave us. It's life-changing right there, right? And I think the biggest thing that I'll be talking about too is kind of combining both like my journey about becoming elite, what I talk about, fixed versus growth mindset. How do you get outside of your comfort zone? Because that's what I find, like you said, the 200 plus authors I've talked to, 9 times out of 10, they're in their own way because they don't know what to do. So I feel like, especially when you're talking about AAL and what's going to happen there, the people there are there to motivate you, to inspire you, but then also show you like, hey, here's the proven process. And that's what I find all the time when I talk to people and I'm like, this is a bigger key than this or this to get in the door, to speak, to coach, to consult, to grow a business, to grow a brand. And I think that's the biggest thing I'll talk about too, is like before even, hey, I played pro hockey, I did this or that. Like, great, awesome. But now I'm an author and people are like, oh my gosh, you wrote a book. And I think that's the portion of kind of combining, right, the whole package of what does it take to be elite, your own version of elite, and then tying that in of kind of why I went the book route and just how it transformed my life. And I mean, similar to you, right? With books change lives, and you look
Hmm.
at where you are because of a book and because of that. And I think when you tell a personal story, it resonates with people. And to that point, who's the right person? I think anybody who's willing to invest in themselves, time and money to get what they want, right? And I think
Hmm.
that's what we talked about. I was just watching something on Tom Brady, and he's talking about football and waking up at 6 a.m. and going to work, right? My son was at practice this morning at 6 a.m. for football in high school, and it teaches you those life lessons, but it's not free. You have to invest time and money to make it pay dividends. So that's the message I hope to spread and kind of, go coincide with some of those great people like Gary Vee, John Gordon, some of the other speakers. So it'll be
That's
fun.
cool. That's cool. I'm looking forward to it. And so was last year Author Advantage Live, was that your first Author Advantage Live with us?
Yep. It would have been, no, that would have been 2 years ago. 2 years
Okay,
ago or
2 years
last?
ago.
I think 2 years ago. Yeah, because I got all the stuff in the mail and right and
Yeah.
everything, and it's
Oh
all
yeah.
organized and you got the online resources and I kind of check in, check out. I mean, I could had different stuff going on, but I mean, and upgraded so I could get all the recordings, right? Because I mean, right there, the value in that just to be able to go back to it. It's kind of like the book, right? You can go back
Yeah.
and kind of see. But yeah, I mean, it now I always use analogy of sports. I mean, now this year's event, I mean, it's like it's on steroids. I
Yeah.
mean, what you're getting, the people who are coming in,
This
it's
is the
not your
Barry
norm.
Bonds era of Author
Yeah.
Advantage Live. Hey, well, enough about Author Advantage Live, guys. If you're watching or listening, grab a ticket. You don't want to miss it. Prices are about to go up. Go to authoradvantagelive.com. They're selling fast, so make sure you grab a ticket. Erik, let's dig into your story. Obviously, almost a decade as a pro hockey player. At what point did you say, "Hey, I want to write a book about these experiences"? And what was kind of the nudge to do that?
I think honestly, for me, what happened is as I was trying to grow different businesses. So, quick little 2 minute side note is right. Went played professional hockey, went back to get my master's in business and finance, open up finance insurance company, got into consulting, a little bit of speaking, but there's no like organization or like deliverable. And as I started thinking about it, I started, my concepts, kind of my principles were forming like who I was and who I wanted to be. And I thought about it, like, how did I have success in hockey? And it was all the same things that you need to have success in life. So for me, it was like the book again was the entry point to deliver what was up
Mm,
here and the
hmm.
experiences that I lived back there. And I think that's
Hmm.
what kind of drove me is to be an authority figure. And honestly, for people to take you seriously, I think in
Hmm.
anything, if you want to grow your brand and spread your message and impact and inspire other people. That's the easiest way. It's the most cost effective way to spread that message pretty with a pretty wide net.
That's good. And so, can you talk about some of those principles from being successful in hockey? What are some of those principles that you incorporated in the book?
Yeah. So, I mean, I go through four proven principles. So we talk about the psychological, physical, spiritual, and emotional. And I talk about like the shifts you have. So similar to hockey, go on the ice, you come off, you kind of reset mentally, physically, spiritually, emotionally, right? If you want to go fight a guy or whether you got your stuff together and you're going to go try to score, whatever you're trying to do. And so for me, it was like fixed versus growth mindset, right? It's the power of the mind. And then you look at like a disciplined routine, staying disciplined with consistency. And it gets back to even when I joined your team, every single day, getting up, doing a call review, watching the people who had success before you. Same thing around like spirituality, no matter where you are in that journey, you got to be grounded in something higher than
Mm,
yourself. And then the emotional side of not getting too high and too low. And we were just talking offline about different events and things you go to where you have high expectations, it doesn't work. Yes, emotionally, you're going to let it feel it. You got to feel it, but then it can fuel you to do something even better. So that's what I realized in hockey when I came off the ice after a game or after a shift. Those are the things and the tools that would help me get to it. And then
mm,
in life, you can't replicate 20,000 people chanting your name. You can't replicate the high of scoring the game winning goal in a bronze medal game. You can't replicate the high of skating with Wayne Gretzky. Like none of that you can replicate. And that was the hardest thing for me is yes, you have success in this thing, but no offense, like that's hard to replicate. So you have to have that intrinsic motivation and it can't just be extrinsic. So those are kind of a lot of the principles that I brought with me into kind of the book and speaking and just the brand in general.
Yeah, that's cool. That's really cool. And it's been fun as just kind of an outsider watching you apply that to the work we're doing at selfpublishing.com. I mean, it's just inspiring seeing your journey because I think, you had a pretty mediocre start, your first month or so. And it was like, okay, didn't go amazing, but then you just turned it on. and I mean, are breaking records are, right neck and neck for number one in the company and so quickly. And as I just zoomed out and reflected, I'm like, there's a lot of principles that he probably learned from playing pro sports that applied here. Like I was just thinking about it, I'm like, okay, to be successful as an athlete, you got to put in the work. So you got to practice, right? You got to put in the reps. You got to watch film and say, hey, what can I improve? And then you probably need to be in some sort of scheme or coaching environment, playbook, whatever that fits your skill sets where you can maximize your skill sets. So as I think about the skill sets of sales, it's like, okay, there's a script or a conversation structure that is that's like the playbook. And then you've got the overarching scheme of how we set up the team and set up the process and all that. Then it's getting in reps and you just took as many calls as you could. And then it's watching the film, AKA doing call reviews and saying, hey, what did I do well? And I'm like, oh, that makes sense. it's you probably just took this playbook and said, hey, this worked well over here. Let me just apply that playbook. And I think the key thing just from an outsider looking in is you did more call reviews than anybody maybe has ever done. And so it was just that in terms of sharpening your skill set, you can get in the reps, but if you don't have a coach or if you're not watching the film, well, then it's like you're just doing the same reps, right? Yep. So that was my interpretation of kind of how you took these principles to be an elite hockey player over here to be an elite performer on the team. You feel like that's a good assessment? Are there things that I missed, things that I got wrong there? How do you look at that?
No, I think it's pretty dead on, right? Because you look at, I mean, even my schedule now, the first hour, technically my work day, right? I still keep that designated for training. Tomorrow might be the first time I fudge on that because I might have somebody, in a different country that needs to get on my schedule. And I'm very tentative in that because every morning, right, in that hour, I listen to a call, whether it's an SDR, so someone's setting the appointment, whether it's myself or whether it's another sales guy. And I've been pretty religious in that to be able to do it. And you go back to, like you just said, month one, month two, month three, I had other vacations and other things set up. So I didn't even work the full month technically to be able to break, the first month record and different things. But what it is it's that bar I set against myself. And it's to your point, it's watching film or listening to call reviews, right? It's looking at the playbook. You're not going to follow the playbook 100%, right? You're going to call an audible when you need to. And I think that's what I learned is follow the script, right? Nail that into your head because that's about 75% of your conversation. But the other 25% has to be you. So it's the same thing when someone's reading my book or when I'm talking to someone about becoming an author. Yes, we have a tried and true process, but your process of what you're going to go through in your roadmap, Chandler, is going to be different than mine, is going to be different than hers, and different and so forth. So I think that proven process for myself is discipline and also getting uncomfortable, right? Because when you're comfortable, I think that's when it changes. So for me, it was getting uncomfortable, right? Taking calls, getting denied, and then moving on, and then following up. And I think that's one of the biggest keys is just having the relationship with yourself to realize like you're far from perfect and you're going to keep growing. And when you realize that and you're humble and you go through the process with the work, I think that's what makes the difference. The consistency is going to turn into confidence.
Consistency turns into confidence, and a lot of times comfort turns into complacency, right? So pushing yourself to be uncomfortable. Let's zoom back into your personal author journey, Erik. How did you hear about selfpublishing.com? Where were you at in the process? Like, had you started your book? You had it done? Not yet. And why did you decide to work with us back when you did that?
So I think like a lot of people probably, right? You Google self-publishing, how do you self-publish? What does it look like? I had heard both, traditional, hybrid, self-publishing. And when I went through and, you got the book in the back, first thing I did is I got that free resources, right? That's what's unbelievable about what you've done and what the company's done is, hey, not everyone's a fit, but we're going to make sure you can write your book, whether you're with us or you're not. So I'm a right elite performer. So I'm like, I can do this, right? Play pro hockey for 12 years. I can write a book. So took that outline, went mind map and right through the whiteboard outline, wrote the book, even took it, got a copy of it. I'm like, I'm done. And then I'm like, oh my gosh, now the hard work happens. So do I go on all these do it yourself, right? Piecemeal a cover design, piecemeal a formatter, piecemeal. And I just said, you know what? These are the best people, right? Looking at reviews and just getting insight information. These are the best people. Scheduled a call, jumped on that with someone like myself, right? Matt Seitz, who was, just getting into it, I think, at the time. And then Aaron, obviously, who's our fearless leader now, both jumped on and went through the process. And it was just the way that it was outlined and delivered of it's self-publishing, right? So there is, I think that's where people get so sidetracked is we're going to walk you through the whole process. We're going to coach you and we're going to do a lot of it for you. But at the end of the day, it's your story, no matter if it's a children's book, if it's a novel, if it's a self-help, if it's motivation, you have to do some of the work because it's your story that we're trying to sell. So that's what I fell in love with is it's the individual roadmap is
Right.
different for everybody, but that process is very similar because I mean, we've published what over 7,200 books, 91 countries,
Mm-hmm.
18 languages, and the track record shows it. So once I knew that, I'm like, you know what, it's a no-brainer. The investment in money for my time was 10x, and I think
Mm.
that's what a lot of the authors, don't realize is why reinvent the wheel when you already invented the wheel, right?
Right, right. Well, and I mean, I look at it as self-publishing as it's entrepreneurial publishing. It's betting on yourself. And when people work with us, they keep all the rights and royalties. We do some of that final mile stuff, like you said, that's hard. It's confusing. You got to hire a bunch of people, cover designer, formatter, ISP. How do I do all this stuff, right? So you have to hire 7 different people and pay them this money and find them and hope that they're good and all the things, right? And so it's like we do that final mile for people, but then they keep the rights and royalties, which I think is a really powerful part of the model. Whereas an author, you can bet on yourself. And then to your point, every person's journey and needs are different. That's why we start with the consultation call and do a publishing consultation with folks where we say, hey, what are your goals? What are your challenges? What's the plan? All right, let's come alongside you, put together a plan, see if we're even a fit to work together. Because I think this is something that not a lot of people realize, but I mean, we have thousands of people apply to work with us every month. We only accept a handful of those folks into the program. So we've got about an 8% acceptance rate. Harvard's acceptance rate is about 5 to 6%. So you could say it's almost as hard to get into selfpublishing.com as it is to get into Harvard. And that's not hyperbole. That's just math, baby. Right? Like that. And even the hundreds, if not thousands of people a month that we disqualify from even talking to us because they're not fit or they're not serious about it. Right. And so, but that is why I think it's like a really helpful starting point of the journey is that call to customize it. And so I'll mention this real quick, guys. If you're listening to this right now and you're thinking, hey, I'm on my book journey and I want to take that next step, whether it's I'm still in the ideation phase or even I've published and this thing is just not doing anything and I want to like really market it better. I would encourage you book a call with Erik specifically. You can go to selfpublishing.com/Erik. That's ERIK. Erik spelled with a K. So selfpublishing.com/Erik. Book a call with him. He can walk you through the process and how it might be helpful. Erik, I want to ask you this. As your time as an author with us, what was the most helpful part of the process?
I mean, that's a kind of a loaded question. Depends on where you were in the process, right? I think for me, like my initial title was Let's Make the Shift. So again, it was around hockey and shifting. And, my subtitle, I don't remember, and the cover design was, something different. And met with Brett, right? Who's, I mean, obviously he's a legend. He's been around forever. And just the wherewithal and just the market knowledge that the team of coaches have, right? And you have to come into this with no ego, right? And humility of like, do you really think Brett wants to change everything and not have success, right? He
Yeah.
wants to be the guy who's like, hey, I'm the one who came up with this title. He never says that. I don't even know if anyone knows this, right? We worked on it together and then we started talking about what that looks like. And obviously, the cover design team is lights out. I'm working on my second book now, and I kind of cheated around the fact that hopefully my title sticks, but the internal team, I kind of sent a little message like, hey, what about that? And like literally sends over this unreal cover design. And I got two that I'm looking at within, X amount of time because they're so good. And I think that's for me, that's what helped the most. Like that's priceless to be able to have A, the communication, but B, the team, right? So if Brett didn't know
Mm,
some, he might lean on a different coach, right? You got
right.
10 coaches. It's not a one man pony, right? Like some of these places who
Hmm.
say they're going to help you self publish, right? It's a guy in his basement and somebody else who's doing graphic design. Whereas the team, that's what I found is if I didn't get the answer somewhere. And then the one thing I utilized probably the heck out of was the office hours with coaches each
Mm,
week. If I got stuck, I would jump on, whether it was with Brett, Scott, whoever the coaches were, and I'd get an answer because I didn't need an hour meeting for that.
right.
I just needed. So for me, that's what I mean, from the cover is what sells the book. And that was my
Hmm.
biggest thing is like, how can I do that? But you go through the whole process formatting. I mean, this image actually came from the inside of my book from what they formatted and found.
That's
I don't even know
cool.
if I found it or they found it. It's in here. And then I started tracing it one day with a
Cool.
hockey puck. And that's how this brand, right? All my stuff, right? That's branded came out. So, I mean,
That's cool.
obviously I could, that's why I'm here working with you because I think, just the team and the people and everything. So, like I said, loaded question because each part of the process, got better. And the editing I use is actually our in-house editors now,
Yeah.
right? So Kat and her team I use for copy and content edit. So it's all
Yeah.
kind of come full circle, which is pretty cool.
That's cool. That's amazing.
I hope you're loving this episode so far. So if you're serious about writing and publishing your book, we would love to chat with you and help create a custom plan. All right. So all you need to do right now is go to selfpublishing.com/schedule. Schedule a 45-minute consultation with one of the experts on my team. All right. Let's implement what you're learning in this episode and let's see how we can help with your book. Go to selfpublishing.com/schedule.
And I think one thing to just underscore, because it's so funny, I feel like we do a bad job of publicly talking about this, but is part of if we're selecting someone to work with us, is we pair them up with a coach based on their needs and their style and their book and all that. And because we do have a deep coaching bench and a bunch of folks who are really, really talented, we're able to make those pairings that work really, really well. It's like a wine pairing, right? I mean, it's like just you coming in, it's like, oh, cool. We've got a business focused coach in Canada.
Yep.
It's like, who knows hockey?
Yep.
Like, let's pair him up with Erik. I think this is going to go really well. And just like, I think is part of the secret sauce. Let's talk about lessons learned from the calls. So for folks who are listening to this, watching this, thinking about booking a call with you, booking a call with the team, thinking about working with us, they can learn from this. And even if they're not, they can learn from this. But so you've done over 200 one-on-one calls with potential authors, aspiring authors at the start of their journey. What have you recognized as some of the biggest hurdles or challenges that people have to overcome to get started and to actually commit to their book?
Yeah, I think there's a couple, right? Right out of the gate, the biggest one is everyone's like, well, I have so many ideas, right? Or I think my idea is good, but I don't know, right? So I think that the biggest part, and it goes through the whole process of the call. It's imposter syndrome, right? It's like, how can I mean, even for me playing pro hockey and getting an MBA, like I still had imposter syndrome, right? Whereas people are like, why would you? You have authority in that space. So I think the biggest part is like you don't have to have your book done. You don't have to have the whole thing written in your head or on paper. It's the passion. If you're in that 80 plus percentage of people who have thought of writing a book, join the 1% that actually do it and execute on the plan. And I think that's one of the biggest things is people think they either have to be in a certain place to be able to be accepted. Like we're only taking people who have the rough draft done, or we're only taking people who have
Ah, that's a good
four
point. Yeah.
four ideas, or we're only taking people who are in this part of the process. So for me, I think that's one of the biggest ones is imposter syndrome. But I think a lot of it boils down to they're so unsure. And that's what's great about talking with myself or anyone on our team is we walk through, you said at the beginning, hey, what's your book about? What are your goals? What does success look like for you? And then we can kind of make that up in our mind, right? Because if you don't have the passion and you don't have kind of that purpose, right? Some people, it's a bucket list item and they want 5 books in their kids' stockings on Christmas. Awesome. Some people want a 5, 6, 7 figure business on the back end, and that's perfect. And some people are in the middle. They want to impact and inspire, do community outreach and speaking. So I think that's probably one of the biggest ones. And then the last one is always they fight between because they're like nervous to do it. And then they're also excited. And most people let the nervous energy. So when I coach athletes and business people, the last 10 years, nervous energy and excited energy, it's actually the same thing. So if you're nervous on an airplane, for instance, and you started to say, oh my gosh, this is so fun. Like I'm riding up and down and this is so exciting. You're going to change your perspective of what that looks like. And it's the same thing in this space. If you let the nervousness, you're never going to write a book, right? So you're calling us because you're excited. You're calling us because we're the experts. You're calling us because you have an idea, and don't let imposter syndrome and nerves defer you or deter you from even making the call and then going forward with the program.
That's good. That's good. It's so interesting because I think there's the things that that keep people from making the decision to actually join. I mean, and we know people who pay attention, right? So where money goes, energy flows. So as soon as you write that check or process that credit card or whatever, I mean, you're now all of a sudden you decided, you're bought in, literally. And so there's that point, which is, all right, am I really doing this? Which is, I think, is the amazing part about the calls that you have with folks is you can help them, quite frankly, stop making excuses and commit to themselves and commit to this book on that call. But then I think something we don't think about a lot is there's that blocker or impediment before they even get on the call. And I just wonder how many thousands, tens of thousands of people that's happened to, where there's the imposter syndrome or the limiting beliefs or whatever that keep them from even excuses that keep them from even getting on the call. I guess I get to see that a little bit more when I'm running webinars and trainings and stuff like that, because I'm seeing it in the chat and it's like, oh, I don't have time. Or the big one is like, hey, I'm going to get back in touch with you later, right? Like the timing's not right. And we just see that for most people, maybe someday becomes maybe never, and they just keep kicking the can down the road. So that's where I would just really encourage and challenge people who are listening to this or watching this is you might have those things in your own life of like, hey, who am I to write this book? Or, oh my gosh, I got this pit in my stomach because I haven't even told anyone about this book. So it feels intimidating to even get on the call with Erik and talk about this because I'm like, I haven't told anyone about it, right? Or any of those things. There's those excuses then, and then there's the excuses once you actually get on the call that keep you from getting started. And so I guess, can you speak to that, Erik? Like, how do you help people on those calls get off the fence and actually make a decision? Like I know a lot of times people are wrestling with that.
Yeah, well, I'd say this, Chandler, too, even what came to mind when you said that, if I haven't told anyone or can I do this, how many people have ever come up to you and said, hey, I'm an author? Like if you just say, hey, I'm an author, you're, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Right. And I'm not discounting like what the book's about, but I had an author in the financial space, right? A woman entrepreneur that wants to write in the financial space. She's like, well, I just don't know. And I kind of bluntly just said, I go, here's the deal. I said, honestly, in a weird perspective, like even my book, like some people are going to read it. A lot of people are just going to look at it and be like, oh my gosh, you're an author. Right. So to be able to get over the hump, it's going to depend on like what is holding you back. And if you're actually honest with it, because let's be honest, 90% of people are going to say that it's a financial investment and I got to think about it. Right. But yet we'll spend, thousands and thousands of dollars on other stuff that's not investing in us. Right. So many people have such a hard time investing in themselves. And I think what happens is they don't look at like becoming an author because you can't, like for you, your book, my book, anyone, like you can't take that away. When I'm gone, the book is still there. And I think that is the biggest thing, is like actually digging deep. And those are the questions we ask, right? Like, what does success look like for you? What are your challenges? What are your obstacles, right? Like, let's get vulnerable so we can try to figure out what that looks like in that space to be able to overcome it. So I think that's the biggest thing. It's almost sometimes you got to put, walk hand in hand with people and just say, hey, I mean, you sitting down in my basement over there when I was talking to Aaron about it, and I'm just like, I don't know, should I do it? Should I not? But to your point, once you jump in and you invest in it, it makes it real. And then the success is going to happen. Right. And I always say, like, I'm like, I can guarantee it. If you put 100% effort in, we're putting 100% effort in, you're going to have what that success looks like. But I think people are afraid to do it. To your point, like, oh, I haven't told any. Well, if I walked into a place and said, hey, I wrote a book, you think anyone's going to look at me and be like, dude, you're an idiot? Right? Like, why would you write a book? They're going to be, oh my gosh, I can't believe you wrote a book. I don't know anybody, whether it's a kid's book, a novel, whatever. No one's going to look at you and be like, I can't believe you wrote a book.
Yeah.
Right. But to your point, that's the built-in excuse of like imposter syndrome. And I don't know if I can do it. And I mean, I'm here to tell you, I had a call today, right, with a guy who's dyslexic. I have someone who's working through the process that we just signed up last week, who's blind. I have a gentleman, who went through a tragic event when he was younger. He's got a speech impediment. The dog, he's writing a book. So I'm telling you, like, these are stories of people who are like the least likely to write a book because they don't even have sometimes the capacity to do it in a certain sense. But once they get over that hump and say, this is going to be my reality, it happens,
That's cool. I like that. Well, you've got a unique perspective in the sense that, you work with us for multiple years as an author and then now on the team. So you've gotten to see, hey, in the community alongside authors in the program, and then now at the start of people's journey and helping enroll them into the program. From both perspectives, what's one or two common traits of the most successful authors that you've talked with?
I mean, one of them, and we were talking about it before, which is like how athletes and just how people are. I mean, I think discipline, right? Because if you look at working with your coach, having the portal, having, basically it's like self-publishing for dummies, right? You go through and it's like a checklist. As I'm writing the second book, you go through mind map, outline, everything. So if you stay disciplined, and I always talk about 1%. That's 15 minutes a day. Even if you do 15 minutes a day for 100 days, you just improved 100%. So if you can do that in the book aspect, right? So discipline is a big one. And then also engagement, because as an author, it can be lonely because everyone thinks, hey, I have to go into a cabin in the mountain or I have to go escape, right? Which is fine. You can escape in the basement, your office, you're still alone writing. It's like sports. You don't have somebody cheering you on. Yeah, go, go, go. Right. And I think that's the part. So like the discipline and staying engaged, right? Because the people, I can guarantee anyone who, says, oh, this isn't right for me, or I didn't like this process. And I had a call with a guy today. He said that. He goes, it says it, self-publishing. You have to be self-motivated to actually do it. So if you have self-motivation, which is discipline, because you do it when you don't want to do it, that's the difference between motivation and discipline. Motivation is when you do it when you want to. And then the other part is engagement, right? Engaging in the community or engaging with your coach, engaging, with other people. And I think those are the two that I find those have the most success, because it is a lonely journey sometimes when you're an author. And then that's when imposter syndrome and all those things we talked about, that you get somebody off the fence, and that's the easy button, right? That's to go back in their comfort zone. But to get uncomfortable is through discipline, right? Consistency and engagement.
That's great. I love that. Let's talk about the flip side. A common trait or two of people who don't do well, or even people who just don't even get started. What have you seen there?
Yeah, I'd say one of the biggest one is I've got to be like polite on this, right? Is I don't want to say laziness, but it's like thinking that you're just going to say, like, I'm going to say, hey, Brett, I want to write about, proven performer. I want to be a speaker. Here's my idea, right? Call me in 30 days and let me know when it's done, right? That it's gets back to self-publishing, right? It's about you, and that's why we want you to be involved, right? So no matter how you're writing it or what you're doing it, you have to be involved and engaged. And I think the people who
Yes.
don't, right, have these expectations that we're just going to take your idea or your book or whatever and just do it, right? Yes, we do the majority of stuff for you, but we want the engagement. So book cover design. Hey, give us some feedback. Let's deliver it, right?
Yep.
And I think that's the same thing with people, right, who don't jump in. It's because they don't have those tools, right? They have that self-doubt. They're just kind of questioning. And it's always, when is the time, right? So I had a mentor of mine, my neighbor across the street, right? He's got like apple and pear trees, and he always brings fruit over to my house, right? And I told my mentor, I'm like, gosh, I'm like, especially with how expensive fruit is now. I got 4 kids, and my kids love fruit, right? Which is great, but it's pretty expensive. So I asked my mentor, I said, I'm thinking I might plant one. I'm not sure when. And he's like, when do you think you should? I'm like, I don't know, Minnesota, the weather. I said, my father-in-law's a farmer. He goes, Eric, he's like, zip it. He goes, best time to plant it was yesterday. So do it now and you'll bear the fruits later. To this day, still haven't planted a tree. But great news is his son went to college and they're empty nesters, so they get a ton of fruit, and my kids can reap the rewards of the fruit. But to that point, when I talk to people, it's like the timing, right? I think it's the timing that they
Totally.
always talk about. I'll do it. I had a guy yesterday. He's like, "Yeah, I'm going to call you January 1st." I'm like,
Yeah.
"I'll be waiting. I'll be
I
waiting."
bet. I bet you, and you say, hey, you want to bet? I'll bet you $1,000 you want.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like, you're not. I
No,
mean, and we've been around long enough, almost a decade now, to see that. And if you're around long enough, you outlive all the timelines that people told you they were going to get back to you in. And we're batting about 0.1% on those people actually circling back. And so I would say the timing's not right is just in general, just a big excuse to not get started.
I
would
got my
say,
checklist for everybody who's going to get started in January, so I can send them my new book. Hopefully, so it keeps me accountable. So I can send them all, hey, I know you were going to get started. I started the same time you were going to get started, right? I'll be like, hey, here's book 2. Maybe that'll push them over the edge. We'll
I
see.
love that. I love that. Well, a couple final questions and we'll wrap up. Knowing what you know now, both from going through the process yourself, but also from advising a bunch of folks who are getting started in the process, what would be your parting piece of advice for the folks who are, hey, I want to get a book done this year or these next few months, or they're kind of wrestling with it, thinking with it on the fence? What would be that advice?
Well, the best part is we didn't even go over any of this conversation beforehand, right? Got on here and just shoot from the hip. Exactly what I just talked about. Like, my advice to myself was I should have done it 6 months early. I should have done it, right? So as I went through that process, like, if you have the passion, the idea, and the thought of actually doing it, like, get off the bench and into the game, lack of a better term. And I think that's the biggest thing, because I wish
Ooh.
I would have done it a lot earlier, because literally after I published that, the fruit 3 months later, I mean, it was crazy, right? The thought leader, the legitimacy, validating, and just getting out, and the impact that it made. So for me, that's the biggest thing, is like, get out of your own way and come see what it's about, and then engage in it and do it. Because I'm going to guarantee you one thing, guarantee you're going to have a book in your hands. So what is the worst case scenario when you get started? Worst case scenario, you have a book in your hands. And then from there, we help guide you in, do you want it just, local? Do you want it national, or do you want it worldwide? Right? Where do you want to get that to? And the tools and resources you can do. So for me, it's like, I wish I would have done it a lot earlier. And it's hard to tell people because I've been through it. So they look at it like, okay, well, you've been through it, but then you're also part of the company. But then I'm like, well, why do you think I'm here? Because I can tell you exactly what it took. And you can tell those people when the light bulb goes on, because I think I've always thought about it, but now I'm going to get off the bench. And I mean, nobody's ever come back to me and said, I wish I didn't do it.
Yeah.
All of them come back and say what I just said. I wish I
Right.
would have done it earlier.
Mm-hmm. And that's very common, especially with busy high achievers and entrepreneurs, right? And it's very common that they will hear me talk about this for a really long time. Hey, you got to have what are you doing? Dan Martell, great example of that. Good friend of mine. I've known him for a long time. We've snowboarded together for probably 7-8 years. And he just launched Buy Back Your Time, I guess a year ago. And he's like, oh my gosh, I wish I would have done it so much earlier, because it's just exploded his brand, his business, all that stuff, right? By the way, he'll be talking about all this at Author Advantage Live. So you guys should grab a ticket and show up. But I wish I would have done it earlier. So if you're watching this, listening to this right now, get off the bench and into the game. It starts with booking a call with the team, and let's see how we can help. So go to selfpublishing.com/Erik, ERIK. So selfpublishing.com/Erik. Book a call with Erik. We'd love to chat with you, see if it's a fit, see how we can help, kick you in the butt a little bit, get you started, and you'll be on your way. So I would encourage you, if you're thinking about it, book a call with him, and let's do the dang thing. I know you said some people say, hey, I'll talk to you in 30 days, and I hope you got the book done. You got to be engaged. You got to be involved. We're rolling out ghostwriting. So that'll be a little bit more, it'll be a little bit closer to that reality, but it still takes involvement, right? You've got to be the CEO of your book, and you got to be in the driver's seat. Now, we're going to be some of the implementation arm, yes, but you got to be involved. You got to be engaged. And when you do so, watch the results that brings. It's exponential. It brings leverage to what you do. You do work once, you create this book, that book goes on to impact thousands, tens of thousands, maybe even millions of people. It brings back income in the form of royalties. It brings back business. Like I could talk on this for a really long time, but book a call with Erik, chat with him. Let's get started with your book. Erik, where can people go to find out more about you, your book, get a copy of your book, all that stuff?
Yeah, so I mean, the website is obviously Amazon, but my website's erikwestrum.com. So that's just where you can find it, ERIKWESTRUM book.com. And I'd leave with one thing too, Channel. You made me think of it when you talked about at the beginning, right, about investing in yourself. That's the conversation. It just kind of gave me an aha moment to kind of talk with authors now too, as traditional publishing or other ones, some people are like, hey, do you invest in it? And then what about I put some in, you put some in, so we both have skin in the game. The problem with that, it makes it so easy on you to blame other people, right? So when you put your full part of the pie in there and you get your full part of the pie on the back end, that's how you're going to stay. And you said it before, right? To be able to pay for yourself and invest in yourself. And it's just kind of an aha moment, because I get that question sometimes. And I'm like, traditional or hybrid, like, they don't care. Yeah, they're quote unquote putting their percentage of the pie in, but all they're doing, it's like going to the local store and they say, oh, this is 50% off. Really? They're selling it to you at full price, right? But they're not putting any skin in the game. So I think that's to that point, is when you put time and money into it and you get off the bench and actually do it, like you're not going to be mad that you made that investment in yourself. So I think that just kind of was an aha moment as you were just closing there, of what you can do and the power that you can put in yourself, right? And make an impact in others.
It's great. Well, guys, go check out the book, Becoming Elite. Obviously, you can book a call with Erik if you're thinking about working with us on your book. And then lastly, you can get a ticket to Author Advantage Live if you want to see Erik and a bunch of other folks speak there. Go to authoradvantagelive.com. Erik, you're the man. This is fun. Thank you, sir.
Cool. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much for watching or listening to this episode of the Self-Publishing School podcast. I know there's so many places that you could be spending your time. There's other podcasts that you could be listening to, YouTube channels that you could be watching. So thank you so much. It means the world. Now, I want you to do 3 things right now if you found this episode helpful. I don't know if you know this, but we've got a YouTube channel. It's a companion channel to this podcast. All the video versions of the episode are on the YouTube channel. So number 1, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Number 2, if you're listening to this podcast wherever, whether this is Spotify, Apple Podcasts. Number 2, I want you to subscribe to this podcast right now so you don't miss a future episode. And then number 3, this is probably the most important, leave a review on the podcast. All right, reviews are super important and help this podcast get discovered by other people. So number 3, leave a review on the podcast. Thank Thank you so much. I'll see you in the next episode. Thank you so much for watching or listening to this episode of the Self-Publishing School podcast. I know there's so many places that you can be spending your time. There's other podcasts that you can be listening to, YouTube channels that you can be watching. So thank you so much. It means the world. Now, I want you to do 3 things right now if you found this episode helpful. All right, number 1, I don't know if you know this, but we've got a YouTube channel. It's a companion channel to this podcast. All the video versions of the episode are on the YouTube channel. So number 1, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Number 2, if you're listening to this podcast wherever, whether this is Spotify, Apple Podcasts, number 2, I want you to subscribe to this podcast right now so you don't miss a future episode. And then number 3, this is probably the most important, leave a review on the podcast. All right, reviews are super important and help the podcast get discovered by other people. So number 3, leave a review on the podcast. Thank you so much. I'll see you in the next episode. If you're on the fence about scheduling a publishing consultation call with my team, maybe you're not quite ready for that, I've got some free training that I think will be really helpful for you. All right, all you have to do is go to register to sign up. Go to selfpublishing.com/free training. When you do, you're also going to get a free digital copy of my new book, Published. And on that training, you're going to learn the next steps, so how to implement with your book. So how to write, how to publish, how to launch successfully. So go to register right now at selfpublishing.com/free training. I'll see you there.